All right, good morning. Welcome to the Turfgrass Team Times from a limited OSU turf team on the end of May as we get into the heavy battle of summer. Labor Day weekend is upon us, and so that usually is the start of losing hair. You can see I've had Labor Day for many years. Online, we've got Dr. Dave Shetler and Dr. Dave Gardner. Dr. Gardner, take it away with the weed issues.
All right, good morning, everybody. So yeah, we're at the end of May, and so most people have probably made applications of broadleaf herbicides in an attempt to control things like dandelion and white clover and etc. A couple of weeds that you may be having a little bit more trouble with include Oxalis and Veronica. There's a couple of different Oxalis species that we may see. The one that's more common is the annual species of Oxalis, which tends to have more green leaves, a very easy to recognize 5-petal yellow flower, but also easy to recognize trifoliate, distinctly heart-shaped leaflets. This species, it's kind of confusing because it's often termed an annual, summer annual. So this is something that you see germinating a lot in late summer, but you also see it germinating at this time of year or earlier. And then even sometimes it can be, temporarily perennial. So it's kind of all over the place, like Poa annua when it comes to its life cycle. In addition to that, we also are starting to see more of this species, which is Oxalis corniculata, which is a perennial. It tends to have more purplish color in the leaves, not always, but that's something that we do see with this species. But I'm seeing a lot of this in bloom now, not only in turf, but also in landscaping beds. And it can be kind of difficult to deal with. In turf, the herbicides, the active ingredients that are shown to be somewhat more effective include triclopyr and fluroxapyr. Now, neither of these are particularly good options if you have oxalis growing in a landscaping bed, but let's just worry about the turf for now and say that, if you do see this as a turf problem, those herbicides that you use that contain triclopyr and fluroxapyr would be a good choice for you. Another weed that you may see being annoyingly resilient to your herbicide applications includes species within this genus, which is Veronica. These are actually distantly related to the plantains. They're in the same family, but they're much smaller weeds. But the common name for these are the speedwells. So there's like corn speedwell, creeping speedwell. There's several different speedwells that we see infesting turf that, again, the life cycle on these can be somewhat variable, but most often these are winter annuals. And so one thing that you can do to control these if you have a severe infestation of these is you can consider the use of a pre-emergence herbicide containing prodiamine or oxadiazone the previous fall. For post-emergence control, there's a variety of different herbicides that are recommended. Those that contain 3 or 4 active ingredients tend to give the most activity, but this is a weed that can actually be kind of difficult to deal with. I've also seen limited success with chelated iron. For those of you that manage your lawns organically, that product can also be effective. And since this is an annual, after you burn the weed down, then you don't have to worry about it necessarily coming back. When we talk about grassy weeds, this is what the crabgrass looks like at the OTF center right now. So it's pretty small, 1 leaf, 2 leaf, but it's pretty tiny. It's there, but assuming that you have a relatively mature turf canopy that's dense, you probably, if you tease the grass out, you can see them growing up, but they're not necessarily visible yet. So this is kind of an odd time where it's technically probably too late to do anything pre-emergence wise because, well, like it's already germinated. Even something like dithiopyr, which has activity on 1 and 2 leaf crabgrass, we're probably at that point that you would want to, not bother with that. But on the other hand, it's too early to do anything with a post-emergence application. Most of the time when we control crabgrass post-emergence, it's during the month of July. I guess what I would say is that if you're seeing crabgrass at this stage, this would be the time to start planning out where it is that you're going to make those post-emergence applications when the crabgrass becomes a little bit more visible. Now, this is what crabgrass looks like right now. It's germinating from seed, right? It's an annual, it's a true summer annual. On the other hand, if you have paspalum, field paspalum, this is what the field paspalum looks like right now. You can have field paspalum come from seed, but this is an oddball in that it's a tropical grass, but it can survive over winter here. And so it's a perennial. So rather than coming from seed, it's reestablishing itself from vegetative structures every year. And so instead of tiny little leaves that are 1 or 2 millimeters in length, what you have are, leaf blades that are, 1/4 to 1/2 an inch thick and, 5 or 6 inches long. So they're already pretty visible in the canopy at this point. So if you see broad-bladed, light green, tropical, light grassy weeds right now, it's not crabgrass, it's not goosegrass, it's this field paspalum because it's able to come back from underground structures. It can survive over winter here. In order to control that, topramazone works pretty good. You tend to have to make more than one application. Sometimes you can get pretty good control with one application, but sometimes what also can happen is that you get good control of the top growth, but then you don't get complete control of those structures that are making that plant a perennial. So you might have to go back and make repeat applications. Or if you applied topramazone last year for the control of field paspalum and you thought you got good control of the top growth, you might go back and check those areas because you may very well have it attempting to come back from the stolons and below ground parts that cause that plant to be a perennial. I've been getting several emails in the last week talking about a light green colored grass that's causing patches in the grass, and it's annoying because it looks different than the species that people are trying to manage. And in almost every case, it's rough bluegrass, which can be confused with creeping bentgrass, but there are some differences. Both creeping bentgrass and rough bluegrass have stolons and membranous ligules that are fairly distinct in appearance. The stolons on both of these species tend to be a little bit less stout compared to what we see on warm season species like Bermuda grass, but both of those grasses are stoloniferous. Both of them have long membranous ligules. The way that you would tell rough bluegrass from creeping bentgrass is that rough bluegrass has a boat-shaped leaf tip, whereas creeping bentgrass is pointed. Also, if you look at how the leaves are emerging, rough bluegrass is folded, whereas creeping bentgrass, the leaves unroll. And then if you look up close at the leaf blade, creeping bentgrass actually has a pretty coarse venation, whereas rough bluegrass, it has a pretty smooth leaf blade, but it has a distinctive midrib on it. So being able to recognize the difference between these two species is relatively important. Again, both of them will form light green patches in cool season turf at this time of year. The creeping bentgrass, we have a somewhat effective control of that's selective. So repeat applications of mesotrione that are initiated in the fall can give good control of creeping bentgrass selectively. With rough bluegrass, unfortunately, there are no selective controls. And so you have to use non-selective herbicides and then reestablish. But again, those are a couple of the problems that I've seen in the last week. And with that, Ed, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dave. The inimitable Dr. Dave Shetler, who surely is covered in skeletons or cytoskeletons from
periodical cicadas.
Thank you, sir.
And definitely we are in full swing of the brood 10, brood X for those people that look at the Roman numerals of the periodical cicada. And I guess the bottom line, if you have not seen the periodical cicadas by now, you're out of the zone of emergence, or you're not in an area where they will be emerging, because they have started throughout all of the area that they're going to emerge. And it's really amazing. I've had some people that are basically 2 city blocks separated from each other. And some of them are seeing them in their backyards, and a couple of blocks away, they're not seeing them at all. And Part of this patchy distribution is over the long history of how we put in some of our suburban areas in agricultural fields. And then maybe next to the agricultural field was a tree lot, and some of the homes got put into that tree lot. And of course, that's where the cicadas are going to be. And so they are very patchy. They don't move very much. And so again, if you haven't seen them, don't worry about them. Now, I was up at Muirfield on Monday, and they're going to have, if you're watching the Memorial Tournament next week, you're going to hear the cicadas and probably seeing some of the people freaking out there. There's always people that don't like bugs landing on them. And these things are pretty clumsy flyers. They just fly around, bang into people and other structures. And they've got little sticky toes on their claws, and they'll hang onto your clothing. But it's always fun watching the referee raise their hand for everybody to be quiet on a really important putt. And then all of a sudden in the background, somebody goes, ah! And it's one of the cicadas landing on them. Well, let's get to the turf insects. We're kind of in that weird zone of the year in that all of the annual bluegrass weevils have laid their eggs. The larvae are doing their thing. The bluegrass billbug has all laid their eggs. Those larvae are doing their thing. The hairy chinch bug is in the middle of its spring generation. And the white grubs have finished their feeding and are pupating. And so it's kind of a weird time of the year, and people are going, well, what should I do? Well, the reality, if you do discover chinch bugs or bill bugs late in the season, my recommendation, if you can get your hands on clothianidin or arena, that product still has very good curative capability of curing the medium to large size bill bugs and taking out the chinch bug. The beauty of using something like clothianidin or arena is that its residual will remain in the soil thatch interface until July and early August and pick up any white grubs that come in. So you get sort of a threefer for a single application. Likewise, here in Ohio, in spite of what you hear of my colleagues over in Pennsylvania and the Eastern Seaboard talking about this pretty complicated applications for the annual bluegrass weevil, here in Ohio, arena or clothianidin is still doing a very good job as a curative for those medium to larger size larvae. We don't seem to have any resistance here to any of the products that we would normally use for annual bluegrass weevil. So that would be my recommendation for that. Now, what about the question of using merit or imidacloprid? For those of you that have had some breakthroughs or failures, I had always recommended making that application closer to the time that the white grub eggs are hatching. So that would be in July and early August. With our sort of dearth of rainfall, we seem to be on the drier side this year. I don't think you're going to see rapid degradation of imidacloprid like what we saw when we had saturated soils. So if you're kind of holding off on those merit applications and want to get them out, I think it's going to be okay this year to make late May, early June applications of imidacloprid, and the residual should still be there in July and August to kill the white grubs. I think in the past couple of years where we've had these failures, they've been applications that were early, and then we had lots of rainfall coming through. And I don't think the rain washed the insecticide through, but that wet environment did allow the microbes to sort of degrade the residues of the imidacloprid faster than they normally would if we were in a drier environment. So go ahead, get going on those grubs, and especially in areas where you've had grub damage in the past, and we'll see how it worked out this fall. That's all I've got, Ed.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. I would think based on the weather forecast, I think the state's kind of about as uniform as we're probably going to get for the rest of the year. Everybody for the next week looks like they're going to be in the 70s and plenty of rain. I think on average, however, we're generally behind. I know the area in Cleveland is still on the dry side. So we will take that rain. I know everyone's like, well, I don't all want it at the one time. well, you're not getting any choice about that, so you're just going to have to get on with it. From the disease standpoint, with no Todd here, a couple of things that I did pick up in the last couple of weeks. Leaf spot has started to pop up, most likely bipolaris, with those darker black structures turning into the yellow halo. And it's going to be on the higher cut turf in general. Now, it's not going to cause large amounts of damage if conditions kind of become quote unquote more comfortable, right? It's where we start to run into these extremely dry, extremely hot conditions in roughs and home lawns that might continue to be a problem. The other one, which potentially a concern, but more a signal of issues starting to arise, was brown ring patch or whitea. And this was actually after appearing post emergence or post, application of a DMI fungicide. Now, the DMI fungicides are generally some of the more highly recommended fungicides. There was one critical thing that did not occur, however. The recommendation for this is to make the application and immediately apply irrigation to a depth of about 1/4 inch afterwards. This was not carried out. So this is not the fault of the product. This is going to be applicator error, right? Brown ring patch generally not considered a largely damaging disease, but it's kind of started to spread. And the one reason that it may be continuing to show up is the fact that we're down at these lower nitrogen rates. It does seem to favor drier areas along with low N management practices. So that may be one thing that has probably helped it develop. But again, the DMIs are probably going to be one of your more effective treatments along with some of the SDHI chemistries. But of critical importance is you do need to make an application or irrigation application post treatment. So those have been probably two main things. I don't think Todd had mentioned dollar spot seems to have been non-existent so far. Dry conditions probably did help reduce any of that pressure. He did mention some leaf spot showing up on greens up in northern Ohio, but again, it doesn't seem to be a major problem. So a dry start to the season has probably helped a lot of our disease issues. But this upcoming, it looks like a week of rain for everyone, followed by warming temperatures, is probably going to start to put some problems upon us. So that was it. A couple other things with those temperatures, maybe amongst the last time, if you're trying to get seed out for the spring, which we don't recommend, but if you are stuck in that situation, Monday or Tuesday of next week looks like it might be an opportunity, followed by the rain if you're kind of on that homeowner end of it, to try and take advantage of it. But once you start getting into June and early July, we're not recommending putting down seed unless you have an ability to control fungal pathogens or supplemental irrigation available to you. We will start talking again about seeding, I would expect, David Gardner, later in August into early September. Other than that, keep an eye out. OTF's conference is going to be back in person. Field day discussions are ongoing as far as Columbus and our events. And if you've not heard, we are back in the process of hiring. So we've both got a faculty position open on the Worcester campus, and we have the Turfgrass Research Farm Manager position is open down in Columbus. And so we're starting to push ourselves back into the world of normalcy, I guess is what you would call that. One final thing, which we will probably try and get him involved, is Dr. Doug Karcher has joined the Horton Crop Science or Sustainable Plant Systems Department in Columbus as their department chair. And so he is a big addition, as Doug has been a very productive turfgrass researcher at the University of Arkansas for the last 15 to 20 years, if I'm correct, Dave. And so we're excited to have him come on board. With that, we will let it go, and we will start to see you on a much greater level of frequency as we get into the heat of the battle called summer. Thank you.